It is 8 o'clock and it's 28 degrees. And from 299 Queen Street West, this is Toronto's Breaking News, CP24. Hi and good evening. My name is Stephen LeDrew and welcome to the Mayor. Mayor John Tory joins me live. And we're going to just start with a shot of something that's happening across the city right now. Pride Toronto. They're looking for feedback from the public on this city's first ever Pride Month. Tonight is the first week of 2 events this week where people can share their thoughts about the Pride Festival. There's a live shot right now. They're looking for ways to improve the event. And we heard earlier from Christina TAWNYA. We'll be hearing from her later on. But let's just go right now to the details because John Tory's here and you can contact him and get his questions. We actually use the telephone sometimes. You can phone 416-872-2724. You can email the mayor at now@cp24.com, or you can tweet us at CP24 using the hashtag AskTheMayorCP24. And let's just get right to it. John Tory's here. Welcome, Mr. Mayor. It's your show.
It's your show, but I'm here to answer questions.
I'm just the wagon master. You do all,
that's fine.
You provide all the content. Let's just talk about that. We had a shot, and we'll go back to Christina at this Pride meeting. It's always good to have a meeting to assess what has happened. Black Lives Matter is there. They were very fractious at the parade. What have you heard about this meeting tonight? And what do you anticipate?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I admire the fact it's taking place because I think an organization that's very successful as Pride is doesn't have to have a meeting necessarily to sort of say, what do you think of how we did and what do you think of Pride Month? But they do that. They operate in a very democratic way. And that includes the consideration of what is a very difficult issue, which is this whole business of what came out of the parade and the protest in the parade and the question, you know, not to focus it too finely, but there is one question that dominated that debate, which is the question of police participation. And I'm glad that it seems at this meeting tonight they're having a peaceful, productive discussion, and that's exactly what they should do, and sort out what they think is best for them. It's their event. I mean, it's not the city's event. It's not your event or my event. It's theirs.
Well, it's a big part of the city.
Well, it is. And
June and the
city
parade
cares
is
very
a big
deeply
one.
about it. But I mean, in the end, it's the Pride people that organize it and put it on, and so I'm glad they're having this discussion, and I hope they come out with some conclusion.
Well, let's just go to Christina TAWNYA. She's there right now. Christina, you, I understand, have someone there with a question for the mayor.
Yeah, it has been a passionate conversation here tonight. Akio is someone who's been part of that conversation here tonight at the Pride Toronto community meeting. And you have a question for the mayor. Akio, look right into the camera and ask the mayor your question.
I have a question for the mayor. I'm really happy that you're glad that this conversation is happening. But what we really need as a Black community, as a Black LGBTQ community, is wanting to find out from the City of Toronto, will you be willing to put aside funding if the Black, Indigenous and people of color LGBT community no longer feel safe at Pride Toronto and would like to have our own Pride? Would you support us?
Well, I won't say yes or no to that in the following sense. I mean, we get many applications for funding for different events, and I'll certainly not say no. I mean, if you're suggesting, for example, you'd have a different festival or a different parade or whatever, I would say that, of course, that would be a fairly considered request. But there are many people who request money from the city for different events who do get it, and some who don't, and some who get less than they ask for, and very few who get more. So I'm certainly not saying no to that. And I would hope, though, that the LGBTQ Black community could feel comfortable being part of Pride. But having said that, if you asked me a hypothetical question, if there was an application made, would I say yes or no? I can't say yes. It's not my decision alone, but I'm certainly saying I would not say no. I would want to look very fairly at that application to put on an event if that's what people choose to do.
Okay, let's just go right now. We have a shot, I believe we're going to have a shot now of you. In fact, this show was supposed to be last night.
It was.
And you wanted to attend the vigil, and we could accommodate that, and we were glad we did. You attended that vigil for Peggy Ann Smith last night, and it's a very moving event. We have a picture of you right there at it. This is it's becoming more frequent. Bystanders being hit, just by stray bullets.
Let's go back to the root of this, Stephen, which is that, as the police officer said today, right here on CP24, the homicide detective, this was 2 people coming down this roadway in the Rivertown neighborhood, a peaceful neighborhood where people were outside as they would be on a summer evening at 6 o'clock in the light, enjoying the outside. And they were shooting, so the police officer said, at a group of, they think the targets were not, of course, this woman, this Peggy Ann Smith, but some of these 5 men who were standing around. And the important part I want to mention is in that very same news conference carried right here on this television station, and you'll see the tape of it going on through the evening, the police officer, the homicide officer, said they now need to talk to not only the other 3 men who are people who are from, they think, that community or who are known to that community, but they need other people from the neighborhood to come forward. And they said some of them had. The biggest problem when you mention frequency of these kinds of incidents is that when they happen, there are people who see things, they notice things, they see these guys running away, whether it's this crime or any other, and they don't speak up. And if we're going to resolve this and get these thugs off the street, people who have no respect for human life and have no respect for our neighborhoods, then we need the help of the public. The police have said they need the help. They can't do it alone. And so I just add my own plea to that of the police issued this afternoon saying, look at this video. Remember what was going on in that area. If you know anything, you should call the police, the homicide squad, or Crime Stoppers. They need our help solving these crimes.
They need our help, and it's a community effort, but you know as well as I do, and a number of the viewers, if someone in that, on that street, on Monroe, last night, or on Saturday, saw these guys and recognized them, or see them again, there's a degree of fright, because these guys carry guns.
Yes, and I think,
the police, and let's talk about the police helping on that.
I think that's the key, Stephen. Is that I think people, for some reason, think the police won't help. They will. And if those people are going to come forward and help, the police understand their obligation to provide a degree of protection for those people. And, people shouldn't assume they won't be protected. They should assume they will be, because in the end, the only way we're going to get rid of this, yes, we have to get the guns off the street, and yes, we have to have some programs in prison. A lot of people don't like to hear this, but there's people, some of these young men in particular, who are in prison, who get out of prison because there's no programs in prison at all, and the only thing they know how to do when they get out is more crime. And they get involved in the gangs and whatnot. So we need programs in prison. And when people deride those programs, they're important. Learn a skill, finish school, so you don't have to go back to crime when you get out. But the other thing we've got to do is get the guns off the street. And thirdly, we have to trust the police that if we help them, they will help and protect you. There's no evidence of instances where people have helped and then have been sort of cast to the 4 winds to be dealt with by the gangs.
Yeah, you can't be hostage to the guns and to the gangs.
Well, otherwise what happens is that we're sort of giving up and letting those people take control. And I can tell you, for one, I am not prepared to see that happen in this city. These are people, as I said, they have no respect for human life. They have no respect for the city. They have no respect for anybody, including themselves. And we have to, get help from people to get them off the street. They've got to be off the street. But then when they get to jail, we've got to try with those where it's possible to get them a skill so they can do something when they get out at age 23. What are they going to do?
Well, yeah. Except for go back to crime, which is not what you want.
You don't want that.
Let's go to Sandy Benita at CB24.com. Sandy, do you have another question from a viewer?
I do, and it's a question about crime, and this one is from Armand, and he wants to know, why do you give the example of American cities and say gun crime is still lower in Toronto when it's still very high by our own standards?
Well, first of all, whenever I do that, and I do it very infrequently, so it may be somebody else you're thinking of that does it frequently, but whenever I do it, it's only to say that as a relative matter, Toronto is still one of the safest cities in the world, and that is a fact. That is a simple fact, and thank God it's a fact. And thank God it's also a fact that when these shootings take place, and I'm not minimizing them for a second, they're happening in a very isolated way to a relatively isolated group of people, and there are tragedies that happen where innocent bystanders get caught up. It's a tragedy when anybody gets shot. But I'm trying to make the point that there is not a problem where if you walk down most streets in Toronto on most days, no matter who you are, that you're going to be the victim of violent crime, because you're not. But I'm not minimizing that, and if you look at Toronto as a city of 3 million people, regardless of what you're comparing it to, it is still a safe city, but we've got lots of work to do, and we have a problem. We have a problem with the number of shootings taking place, many of which do not involve anybody's death. Just a gun being fired off in the city is not right, and it's not conducive with how we live. So I'm not trying to minimize it, but the fact that we're still a very safe big city in North America just happens to be the truth. And I think we should never forget that and never should let up on the work to make sure we keep it that way.
I know somebody watching and listening is going to pick up on what you say, we have a problem, because I've never heard you say that before. I mean, there's been shootings and incidents, but when you say we have a problem, this is not something where you're saying it's expanded. We have a greater problem than before, or is it?
No, the fact is, the facts speak for themselves. The number of shootings taking place this year, shootings that are just where guns are going off and where people are shooting at each other, sometimes not hitting anybody, thank God, is up. You can't argue with that, and I don't. So that is a problem that has expanded this year. And I am saying, however, though, that if there's no good news in it at all, but if there's something that we can sort of continue to focus on, it is the fact that it is a very narrow group of people who are largely involved in gang activity, who are engaged in retaliatory and targeted activity, and that doesn't make it good, it doesn't make it acceptable, it's just a fact. And we've got to get at that, and these people who feel it's okay to carry a gun in your pocket, and then when you get in an argument with somebody, you use it. And so it is a problem that has grown this year, and our objective has got to be, with the police service in the lead, and they're a very good group of men and women who are doing a great job under the leadership of Chief Saunders, is to get that number back down. People forget, Stephen, and again, I'm not trying to minimize what's going on this year against anything else, that back, if you looked in the mid-2000s, we had 89, 90, some murders like that, and we're on track to have a higher number this year than we had last year, but the objective has got to be to get that number back down to 51 or whatever it was last year, or zero.
Okay,
it's got to be to get it down to zero.
Let me again just bring up what I already anticipate is that somebody out there is going to say, see, carding. They're no longer carding. They aren't stopping guys. Therefore, there's more people around, not always guys, but generally guys with guns. No one condones racial discrimination of picking somebody off the street just because they are of color. But do you think that there should be more proactive police work? If they see somebody at 3 o'clock in the morning around somewhere, they should say, come on, let's go. Let's just have a chat what you're doing here.
I think in light of the whole carding discussion, there is nothing that stops the police under a world without carding from asking people in the course of a legitimate investigation questions about that might lead to either preventing crime or apprehending criminals. There's nothing that stops that. What is to be stopped by stopping carding is only the random stopping of people on the street who are doing nothing for the purpose of just collecting information. And I think we believe we live in a country, and the law says we live in a country, where that kind of random stop for no purpose related to any crime that has been committed or might be committed is something that I think we accept as being what makes Canada and other countries like Canada different. But the police still have plenty of power to do their job. They do a great job. And the other thing that's important to note here is that the police and others sometimes conclude that by saying you're not going to have carding and racial profiling, that you are somehow implying police were racist. And they are police officers. The vast, vast, vast majority of them wouldn't have a racist bone in their body. They do their job to go out and catch criminals regardless of what background they're from. They're trying to catch criminals and prevent crime. But carding, which was hundreds of thousands of people being randomly stopped and asked for information, is something that's inconsistent with the law here, the Charter of Rights. And so I don't think this should interfere with policing and with dealing with the shooting problem at all.
Okay, it's a good start, lots of issues. Let's just take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to have more of your questions for John Tory, the Mayor of the City of Toronto. Right back after this. And we're back with the Mayor, John Tory, the City of Toronto Mayor. And let's just get right into it. Here's a question from Jen Paddle. Hi, Mayor Tory. Now the number of poke stops at Jack Layton Ferry Terminal have been decreased. Would you consider asking for additional stops at a location deemed safer for congregating that does not hinder ferry foot traffic? Nathan Phillips Square could be a good option as a space for public gathering, has a large area, and is centrally located. The vendors in the area would certainly appreciate added business, and Pokemon Go players would be thrilled to have another hot spot set up. Thanks.
I actually think that question really gets at exactly the heart of what the problem was here. And my job, of course, is to make sure that all public spaces, in this case down by the waterfront, are available for use by people who want to play Pokemon Go, but also it respects the fact we have ferries going out of there, people live there, parks are there that were getting damaged. And so what I tried to do, and I think it was consistent with my job, is to strike a balance by seeing the number of Pokemon stops reduced at the ferry terminals from 9 to 5. So there's still lots of opportunity to play right there, and that hopefully creates less disruption for the ferries, the neighbors, the parks, and so on. But, you know, Jennifer, who wrote, is right. The Nathan Phillips Square is a big place, and as opposed to a very confined area like around Harbour Square where there was really huge crowds in a very small area, Nathan Phillips Square might be entirely more appropriate. It's a place where people do gather in large groups, and that's all good that they're having fun. So
And the vendors would love it.
I have talked to the people who did the game. They made the change for us at our request, and they were very cooperative. It's a company called Niantic. And they have asked me to explore some ways in which we could do some things together that are kind of innovative for Toronto with Pokemon Go. And so I'm not averse to that suggestion at all. But I just want to explain to people, I have no issue with Pokemon Go whatsoever. My job, though, is to make sure people can play the game and have fun, but also that people who live down there or people who work there or trying to take the Island Ferry can, you know, do those things without being unduly disrupted. So my job is to find that balance. It's what I try to do on every issue.
Okay, Sandy Benita, you've got another question, I understand.
I do, and believe it or not, it's another question about Pokemon Go. And this one is from a caller, and she asks, were there not other options for remedying the Pokemon problem at the ferry terminal, outhouses, garbage bins? And then her hashtag is livid.
Oh.
You know, I'm sorry that you're livid, but again, my job is to achieve a balance between your interests in wanting to play Pokemon Go and those people who live down there, who try to use the park, who try to take the ferry. And, you know, quite frankly, to be answering your question, the notion to me of putting an outhouse there to accommodate these gigantic crowds of people who are there at 2 o'clock in the morning and causing sleepless nights for people who live in those condos who are actually doing damage to a park, not deliberately, but just the trampling was causing damage to the park, I would say no. I mean, that I want people to play the game. I want them to have fun. There are still 5 stops right down in that area by the ferry docks, but it's less than 9, which means the crowds are a bit less. And we're running a big city here, and we have to take everybody's interest into account because we share the city together, 3 million of us. And so the answer is not putting outhouses there, in my respectful opinion. It is to achieve this balance, and I think it's worked to alleviate the situation, and I think it was the right thing to do.
Okay, let's just go to a phone call. I always love phone calls. Tanya, you're on live on CB24. You have a question for the mayor, Tanya?
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Hi. So my question for you is that I've been seeing a lot lately that there's been a lot of development on our roads in Toronto, and for the cyclists. And as myself being a motorist, I realize like we're paying insurance, we're having money that we have to put in onto the roads. Our taxes are getting put towards the roads. We have to make sure we have full coverage. But yet there's nothing on the cyclists. They don't pay, they don't contribute. We have to fight the congestion. They can go right by us with no issues. If they ever damage the car, what's the coverage that covers that?
Okay, Tanya, that's a good question. Are you not in the Senate, are you, Tanya?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
You're not in the Senate, are you? There was
No.
a senator this morning who was tweeting about the same point.
It's a bit of an
Mayor.
inside joke, Tanya, but
Well,
you know what?
she was
In
in
all
the
seriousness,
papers.
your question about the latter point about insurance, I'm not even aware of what the answer is to that, and it's a good question because if a cyclist damages a car, that's an interesting question. But on the question of sort of balance, first of all, let's be clear. I mean, most of the roads in Toronto don't have any special arrangements made for cyclists at all. It's a very few number of places. Some would argue way too few, but I think we're starting to achieve a balance between what I call safe, separated, sensible bike lanes. Safe because they are separated and that they're not mixed in with the traffic, and sensible in that they're put places where they're needed. And I think we're developing that kind of a network now so that people have a way to get around the city that is, environmentally friendly, that is to their choosing, because more people want to cycle now. And so I think we're trying to do this in a balanced way. But I would say that, you know, most of the people who ride bikes are taxpayers. They're going to work and they're earning an income there and paying taxes. And the wear and tear, frankly, they're causing on the roads by having a bike lane is very minimal. So I think we're, again, trying hard to achieve that balance. It's what trying to govern is all about, which is you're not governing for the cyclists or the motorists or the pedestrians. You are governing for all three and trying to make sure people can walk or cycle or drive in the city safely and efficiently. And we're trying every day to achieve that balance, and that is exactly what we're trying to do.
We have to go to the break, but you know, you hit on a very good point in that question, because here's emails about cyclists. Here's an example. As a driver, I was given the finger by a cyclist because I had the nerve to honk at him as he ran a red light, and I almost killed him. I was just, as a pedestrian, I was almost hit at a pedestrian crossing as yet another cyclist ran a red light. So it's a matter of finding that middle ground. It's a two-way street.
And I think the cyclists have to understand, most of them do, the odd one doesn't understand the rules of the road about stopping at red lights and stopping at stop signs apply to them too. And so it's something where I think some of them have to focus more on that, and drivers have to focus on the fact that cyclists are a part of transportation in Toronto now, and that we have to respect each other and share the road and respect the law and respect common sense. And I think if people do that, which most people are doing, we'll all do fine.
And I have to respect the law just laid down to me by the producer. We have to take a break. We're going to come back after this quick break with more of your questions for John Tory. Right back after this.